first hurdle over with, that appears on the screen. Yeah, happy days. And the thing works as well. I was just borrowed yesterday. So who am I? So I'll not read it out because I know who I am. So I'm Dave Morgan. I'm the IMDM, as Ben said, at East Coast North, based out of Newcastle. So I cover the East Coast main line from just outside of Doncaster to Berwick for my sins. But I did join the railway in 1989 into the project office, which was part of the electrification of the East Coast main line. Spent a bit of time in the design office, spent a bit of time in the renewals, but I have spent most of my career in the maintenance organisation. I did then get some jobs in York, and I spent about 5 years in York as well. So I was RIM and RASM. And then I started my journey of 5 years of secondment, which up until now, I don't think anybody can beat me for how long you've been on secondment for. But I covered quite a lot of roles in that. I covered area director, I covered drama as it was then, and I covered IMDM. And then Paul Rutter, who was the chief operating officer at the time, asked me if I would do a specific job about track worker safety. So at the time, we had the worst LTFR nationally on LNE and East Midlands as we were then, which is the lost time injury frequency rate. How many people are we seriously injuring per hours worked? And I did a lot of work in the background, looking at what other companies did, what other similar kind of asset companies like us, so highways. I went and talked to them, went and had a look at that, and we compiled what we would do as an industry for LNA and East Midlands. I'm proud to say within 2 years, we went from the worst LTIFR to the best LTIFR nationally. Which goes on my CV, and it's one of the most proud things that I've got on my CV, to be honest with you. But what it did do for me, because as a track engineer, so I was track engineer at Darwin for 10 years, I thought I took safety seriously, and I think I did. But when you look at safety in isolation, and that's the only thing you look at, you realise that you don't take it as seriously as you potentially should. And what it's allowed me to do when I've gone back to being a frontline manager again is look at safety through a different lens that I probably wouldn't have done, and I feel that I've had the benefit of doing what I've done. So after we did that, the track worker safety programme came into being with a safety task force. So Paul immediately said, "You're our representative on that." So I became the Eastern representation for track worker safety programme and the lead for East Coast route. And it's a badge that I can't get rid of. So no matter what my job is now going forward, I'm still the track worker safety lead for East Coast route. I have to do it in parallel with the job that I've got now. When I became IMDM 3 years ago, that was the caveat from Paul, was that you still have to do this as well, Dave. I said, all right, fair enough. So why do we do track worker safety? I've got some slides from Nick Millington, who was the president of the PWI, but he was the head of the task force from day one for the track worker safety programme. And some of these slides I've got from Nick, but this is the real reason. So these are people in the past few years that have been killed on any of the railway. So let's not forget. And the top right-hand corner slide there shows how many people were being struck by trains. 75% of them were by lookout system failure. 25% have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. While I was doing the track worker safety programme, I had, I'm going to say, the pleasure of meeting the family of somebody that has been killed on the railway. It's the most powerful thing that I've ever done in my life. I spent 3 hours speaking to the mother and the family of somebody that lost their life on the railway. Just me and her, the mum, and being filmed. And I asked loads of questions, but most of all, she just spoke to me and got upset on a regular basis. And that was 10 years after her son had been killed on the railway. But even more powerful, speaking to his sister, who was now a young woman, and talking about how she had to go into counselling and how it had deeply affected her losing her brother and all that kind of stuff. And I'll touch on the human side of loss a bit later in my presentation. So importance of data, near miss causation, back again to the most outstanding one is unassisted lookout failure. 11% of work was planned with lookout allows over the last 2.5 years, and you'll see a change of how that's changed over the last few years under the programme that I've been involved in. But this slide actually is probably one of the most important. I'm going to talk about track worker safety systems and the programme of what we've put into place, technology-wise, etc., etc. But this is actually the most important slide that I've got, and it's to remove the need to be there in the first place. So whether that be we don't do it at all, or we do it less frequently, or we do it in a different way using technology. So, for example, PLPR, plain line pattern recognition. We do the majority of our basic visual inspections on the East Coast Main Line, apart from S&C, by PLPR now. And then eddy current testing, we don't have to do the ultrasonic testing that we used to do manually for that, etc., etc. So risk-based maintenance in all disciplines and how we do the right thing in the right place at the right time. At the moment, we've been trialing use of drone technology, and I can see Joe's on the call there. Joe's our technology lead for train-borne and airborne inspection regimes. So we've proved the concept of doing S&C inspections by drone in York Section, and we're going to push to doing 3 out of 4 of our inspections of S&C using drones. There's the 153 coming online, which is a train-borne inspection for S&C as well. So again, taking away the physical need to go and put boots on ballast is something that's the most important thing. When I was given the track worker safety job and I liaised with Rob McIntosh as our regional director, he said, I want you to focus as much as you can on removing the need to be there in the first place. So significant deployment of safety equipment through the time of the safety task force, and these are national numbers, deployed 1,500 plus manual T-codes, remote control T-codes, lockout devices, EPR, train online. There's a whole suite of things there, and I'm going to talk about them a bit later on about what those individual things are. So bear with me, and I'll tell you what they are. But I refer back to the slide I talked about before about how many accidents were involved in the use of unassisted lookouts. So red zone working, as we call, but be careful because we still do open line working, by the way. So SATWAS and TAWs and ATWAS are methods that you can work in an open line with trains running. So unassisted lookout working is where we had someone with a flag and a whistle that looked for trains, and when a train was coming, told their mates, there's a train coming, blew the whistle, get off. We started that in Victorian eras.
Just a question. So you said you've got 25% of the work, but 8% of the accidents associated with that work. Is that correct?
So 25% of the accidents were not lookout related. That was situational awareness. I've got a slide a bit later on that shows a bit breakdown and a bit more detail on that. But 100 years ago, 120 years ago, that's how we warned our workforce of our trains coming. And in 2019, still over 25% of our work was done unassisted lookout. So that's where the 25% bit is, and you'll see the accident breakdown. But the graph, as you can see, we have minimal amounts of unassisted lookout now. And the little bit of red that you can see on the bottom right map of the UK there was some of ours down at Peterborough. But since Chris Harrison went to Peterborough as the IMDM quite recently, we've almost eliminated unassisted lookout at Peterborough in the last 2 months as well. Sometimes it's about attitude and behaviour. I did a talk this morning with the safety culture workshop that we had in Newcastle, and I say this on a regular basis. If I told the teams in Newcastle, you can get your flags back out, put them in the van, and you can work red zone working again, they would build a statue of me in Eldon Square, because they still think it's the right thing to do. They're safe with it. We never had a problem with it, Dave. So part of my job has always been to protect people from themselves. Have to eliminate human methods of protection. So we've been like that in Newcastle for 5 years without the use of lookouts. Moving the human element from being a lookout, we went to using line blockages predominantly as the method of work. You could say that that's a human interaction as well. And we were really cautious that we would move the responsibility for protection of staff from the lookout person to a signaller. So the graph on the left-hand side shows additional protection and line blockage returns. And we talk about, on East Coast Route, I'll speak for East Coast Route itself, we were at something like 12% additional protection on our line blockages. And by that is a belt and braces kind. So if the signaller makes a human error, you've got something else in place that protects. I've had to try and sell that to the signalling fraternity that this is not additional work for them. It's actually helping them not make a mistake. And something like Richard Owens used to say to us quite regularly in the early days when we were trying to push additional protection is that I wouldn't want somebody to make a mistake, kill one of their colleagues, and then have that on their mind for the rest of their lives. And you can imagine what that would feel like if it's your responsibility that you've made a mistake and somebody's been killed. So now on East Coast Route, we're at about 67–70% of our line blockages are taken with additional protection. And I'll touch on some of the additional protection stuff shortly. But this is the interesting one, signaller workload and intensity by day and hour. The big heartbeat kind of red in the middle of that graph is midweek, Tuesday or Thursday from 9 till 1, because that's when most of our people want to be on the track. We're trying to get them to spread. The week is 7 days long and 24 hours a day. Why does everybody want to be in from 7 till 1? But it's because our staff are used to being at work. The Monday is less because they're resting after nights. The Friday is less because they're preparing for the weekend. And the heart red beat in the middle of that chart is because that's where everybody wants to work. And then what happens? They turn up to take their line blockage and they kind of get on because everybody wants to be in that same line blockage. So spreading the load, spreading the love, and the stuff that we're doing with modernising maintenance with Chris is how do we roster our people in a better place to deliver work in the places, right time, right place, right thing to do. Causation factors. I've got a couple of slides because there's other technology involved other than just the stuff for the track worker safety, which I'll come on. Simplifying the 019 standard, what we're doing with cost recertification. So we now used to be an online ACC kind of thing, and our safety critical competences need to be assessed on a more rigorous way. So that's now back to classroom assessment. And funnily enough, we had quite a higher failure rate than we were having previously, where everybody was just doing it as part of their online assessments. There's a reason for that. I could pass something to my son who's never worked on the railway, give him a few books and he could pass that test. That can't be the way that we do safety critical competences. And then we've got some focus on human factors. So we've been doing things around IOS training, we've been doing things around risk interpretation, all that kind of stuff. Lifting the skill level of where we are with our soft skills part of when you're a PIC or a COS on any other line, what responsibilities you've got. So Rail Hub, and funnily enough, I am the route lead for the rollout of Rail Hub as well. That comes with the 10. So this is an online system that does safe system work. So it replace SAUPs, replace the paper-based system. We get everything electronically, goes from pick and planner, the section manager, and a check-in process, and everybody can do it electronically and remotely. But there's also the assurance and the check-in facility that we can look at what people are doing and how they're doing it more rigorously. And we've successfully deployed that across the whole country now. Yeah, there's still a few teething issues with it. If you're an online section manager, stroke engineer, in the early days, you got lots of phone calls about the pack doesn't work, this doesn't, but we've ironed most of that out now. There's still an odd thing that comes to mind.
Could I just ask Paul to turn his camera off? That's okay. Paul, you've just popped up in the top right of the recording. I'm not sure you want a starring role. If you could pop your camera off, that'd be great. If you could find the little camera symbol and and untick it.
So this is a graphic that shows how much work we did on open line work and how much we did in allows and line blockages and how much we did in possessions, and you can see the change from one to another, and the open line working is almost disappeared. There's period 3, period 8 just completed, it's even less now. The interesting one with this, so you can remember the graph I showed you earlier with how much work we did in unassisted lookouts. That's the blue line, and the orange line is how many hours between near misses that we've had for track workers on any of the lines. And there's almost like a reverse image. The more that we've removed unassisted lookout, the greater the distance between the time that we've had. And I think the stat off the top of my head is we've reduced near misses with frontline staff by over 70% by just removing the use of unassisted lookouts. And you know, while you're asking the question, that's how it breaks down on the right hand side of lookout failure, situational awareness, possession irregularities, compared 2019-20 to the present day in 21-22.
What's that big orange part? That no.
So that's no safe system of work. So we still have a challenge of people going on the other line without a safe system of work. Sometimes it's by mistake and it's a situational awareness kind of thing. So, for example, we had a line blockage taken last week, correct line blockage taken in the right way, and then they accessed the track outside of their line blockage because the access point was defined outside the line block. So there's an investigation into that, but they've now been on the other line without a safe system work officially. So where are we now? Shows this one about time-bound plans, and additional protection that I talked about is in the bottom right-hand corner. And I was really proud of where we're going. We're actually higher than 57 for East Coast. We were at about 67% for additional protection, because, like I said, that's a belt and braces kind of situation for signallers and for staff. Yeah, there's still been an odd occasion. We did have an EMS on my patch where we had additional protection in place, and there was error of communication. That can still happen because there still is a small human element to that. But the ducks have to line up even more than they would in prison. So they're few and far between. So track safety equipment, going back to the slide I talked about how many we've deployed, I'll go into a bit of detail about what they are. So there's two categories here, protection system and warning system. Protection system is for how we protect additional protection, and warning system is when it's an open line still. So protection system, T codes or track circuit operated devices. There's two types of this. So there's the conventional T code, which is basically 2 clamps and a bit of wire in between them. You put them on from one rail to another, clamp it on, and it drops the track circuit. We use that predominantly now as on-site work protection. So if we are working between A and B and we're in this room, that's the length of our work site. If I place the T code on the track here where I'm standing, drops the track circuit of where I'm standing, and the receiving signal changes to red. And obviously a train can't come because the track circuit, it's as if a train is on this bit of section, so another train can't come. There's a bit more science to it because you have to be able to drop the track circuit. It doesn't affect the level crossing. Does it affect the adjacent road, turnout loops, all that kind of stuff? So we need to know that we're dropping the track circuit in the right way. Well, this was a development that we deployed 1,500 plus of these. In the picture is a person deploying a ZKL. You may have heard that term, and that's a remote controlled T-cut. So that bit of kit there, we place it in the 4-foot, and it basically just jacks into place, and then you lock it in. And then you can deploy that use remotely using an app on your phone. So you can put one or more of these together. So in complex situations, you may need 1, 2, 3, 4 of these, and you can turn it into a project, and you can switch all 4 of them on at the same time. We originally deployed these in Leeds, and we were doing our possession management in a T2 kind of possession style, taking parts of the station, and it reduced the need to put people out of place protection. It reduced the amount of time it took to take a possession, and the productivity and the safety benefits were both in parallel to that. They're quite expensive. They're about £8,000 each, and they cost something like 1,500 quid a year to run them. There's something that I haven't covered today, but I'll pick it up right at the end of this one, which is called an RDD, a remote disconnection device, which does a similar thing, and I'll cover that a bit later. But this is all about iDevices and the use of things and the simplicity and the quickness. So you say to the signaller, can I use a T code? Signaller agrees, press the button. Can you see that, signaller? Yeah, right, you're on. That's how quick it is. In days gone by, our additional protection of choice used to be 3 debts and a flag, and you'd have to send somebody 1.25 miles by themselves, put the debts and flag down, communication between the cost and the person that was doing that, sending somebody off in the distance to be by themselves. That still is a form of additional protection, but on Eastern and East Coast in particular, we want to use that as a last resort. We don't want to be sending people away by themselves to do stuff. We want to use the technology solutions.
Sorry, David.
Go for it.
I'm trying my best. How does the remote control you just explained? You take us through that again.
So how does it work? So this is what we're paying.
I know how a normal e-code would work.
So this is why we pay 8,000 quid for them. So the technology is all in this bit of kit here. So we put it in the 4-foot and it stays in the 4-foot.
Attached to both rails.
So it's attached to both rails.
Okay.
And then when we switch it electronically, the gizmo inside of it then turns it into a bit of wire between the 2 bits in simple terms. And then you press it again to deactivate it, drops the track circuit between the 2 out again. Does that make sense?
It does, thank
So that's T codes and conventional T codes. That's just what I've just explained, to be fair. So the next one is the engineer's possession reminder. It used to be a cost for a long time, and then I didn't use it, and it was hard to keep hold of the confidence. And you know, when I talked about me 5 years on secondment, one of the jobs that I was asked to do was going to check on where we had speed restrictions on, which meant I had to go back out on the track again by myself generally. So I had to go on the Iowa course, and I learned about EPR because I've been at COS for like 20 years, and you know, done my online assessment and passed it every time. Then I went on the course and they started talking about EPR, engineer's possession reminder, and I didn't have a clue what it was. So that's the danger of doing online assessments. So I learned when I had to redo the courses in Iowa what it is. So it's in axle counter sections, and a signaller puts a reminder appliance on their panel that is belt and braces. So when a signaller wants to hand a bit of track back to traffic again, he has to knock EPR off first, then knock the signalling system back. So he has to do 2 things. So there's a belt and braces. We are saying, but it's still a human interaction of one individual. So in places where there's more than one signaller, when you put EPR on, the second signaller has to confirm that it's been put on and that it's taken off again. So there is a belt and braces, but in some of our little boxes and around the patch, sometimes that signal occupancy, there's still, but they have to write it in the register, etc., etc. So it's a similar thing, but it's used in axle counters. And the reason why I didn't know about it on my patch, because I didn't have axle counters anywhere, so that's why I'd never come across it before. But lots of signal renewals are now using axle counters. The digital railway stuff that's at the south end of the patch, axle counters have become more apparent. We do use axle counters in some places for different reasons. So when track circuits can't be relied upon, for example, wet tunnels is a good example. And we're talking about some of our crossings where we lose them through leaf fall season, like we're in now. Putting treadles or axle counters in is another way. So it will be, there's adaptive when they use it in other places. But that one, EPR, is just above debts and flags for the reason that I've just explained, that it can be one person that is the single point of failure, if you like. No, we're caught up. So lockout devices are LODs. It works in a quite a similar way by drop and track circuits again. But I have a bit of a problem with lockout devices because we shout and bawl from maintenance that we want lockout devices to aid and assist us. So what you do is, as in the picture there, you open the cabinet, get permission off the signaler, drop the lockout devices, and it drops the track circuits for a blockage of track. But in my experience, we generally make it that intrusive that they become useless, because when you want to take the up and down main and that slow and that patch and that one, how are you going to get that during the day? Because we need to run trains. So the lockout device then drops everything, so you can't use it. So at initial design stage, and I've been talking about York Station, third road coming out of York Station, been talking about the additional roads that we're putting in at Darlington Station. When I have the early development discussions with project teams, I talk about what's our track worker safety system's going to be. And if we're putting lockout devices in, can we talk about what it locks out? Can we make them useful? Because it costs you a lot of money to put them in, and then we don't use them, and then the signalling fraternity go, why are we spending zillions of quids on putting all these things and nobody uses them? Because they're useless, because they're too intrusive and we can't use them. As it says on the bottom, considered as standard on new re-signalling and remodeling schemes. That's our starter for 10 now, but we've got to make them useful to be able to make them worthwhile putting in. Otherwise, the likes of the frontline staff can't use them. So warning systems, this is for open line working. So, you know, I said red zone, people get red zone and green zone confused. All terminology I do appreciate, but we still do open line working, and this is how we do it. Semi-automatic track warning systems, or SATWAs. Anybody that knows me, that knows that I've been involved in the track worker safety program for the last 5 years, they'll have heard me say this. This is the most frustrating project I've ever been involved in my life, because we've been on for 3.5 years and we still haven't gone live with it. So we had the rules of engagement, we did that, jumped through that box. And this is always the case when you're leading from the front and you're the first person that's doing something. You find out the problems, then you got to solve the problem, then you get the next problem. So, you know, when you say we're playing a different ball game, we're playing a different ball game on a different pitch in a different country now than when we first set out with this. So what it is very similar to axle counters and things, because we have triggers and we set axle counters at a safe distance away from the track, that when a train passes over it, it then gives the system a signal to say there's a train coming, and you get a warning bell on site. So there's lots of design goes into what does them distances need to be, where do you need to put them, but some of the hoops that we've had to jump through. But this week we've been through MSRP, which I didn't even know existed. We've been through SRP. I also didn't know that existed, because in the maintenance world, I never get involved in any of that kind of stuff. Technical questions about processes and procedures. I do understand why we've got these safety projects and processes in place, but it's the most frustrating thing. And when you send a project manager to get something through SRP and they go and they think they're fully geared up, and then you've got the world of signalling asking them loads of questions and they go, I haven't got a Scooby-Doo, what are you talking about? So we fail SRP. So we have to get some technical expertise. So in Newcastle, Martin Errington, who's our IME from a signalling background, Martin's been working closely with our project managers now and has coached. And it's not just about signalling, it's about having the ability to be able to challenge the right people in the right way when people ask you certain questions. People of certain esteem within the business hold that, whereas a project manager that might have been on the business 5 years doesn't have that same kind of position where they can talk about it. But this takes us to the place where we will have and it's called semi-automatic, and I'll explain why that is, because it doesn't give an exit signal that it's left the system, it times out. That's why it's called semi-automatic. I'll come on fully automatic in a second. But we've been through design hoops and design hoops and design hoops to get this to a place. So we've got East Calton's going to be the first next week. We're going to enter it into service. So East Calton will be the first SATWAS on East Coast mainline brought into service. North and East have got one in service. East Midlands have got one in service, and there's one in service on Anglia, which has been a bit frustrating since we started the project and we're the fourth route out of the four. But we've got 5 already in the ground. So I've spent something like £30 million on trying to work the safety programme in 3 years, 3.5 years on East Coast. That's on East Coast route. And a lot of it's gone into this. The one that isn't on here is semi-fixed SATWAS. And this is, again, we're leading by example. There's only us doing this. So north of Newcastle, we've done 1 mile designs for SATWAS. So from Benton, first mile, second mile, and we've got 70 miles of design. And what we're going to do is you plug and play. So you go to the 5th mile, you plug your stuff in, and we've got a design that says you can work safely in this mile and use SATWAS, and you plug it in. We've commissioned the first 10 miles of it. We haven't been through the dreaded SRP or MSRP yet. And because nobody else has done this, we know it's going to be a bit of a challenge. But that's a massive game changer for response to faults for all parts of the industry, of how we can actually go on an open line in a more flexible way than we do today. So TOWs. What's the difference between TOWs and TOWs?
That's a question to ask.
Anybody know? O and A, that's it. So it used to be TOWs, which is track operated warning system. TOWs, train activated one. There's no difference. It's exactly the same, right? But it's a really expensive system. It usually costs us over £1 million to put a TOWs site in, or TOWs as it used to be, which is why we don't do it. We do have it in lots of places existing. So on my patch, quite lucky around Bradbury Curves and Newton Aycliffe, Durham, we've got TOWs already. Use it all day, every day. It's the simplest system since time began. You go, you switch it on. It gives an intermittent beep, 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 beep. You can go on. If it goes beep, you get off. How hard can it be? There isn't even a competence for it. You learn about it on your PDS. That's how easy it is to use, but it's expensive. So we've trialled a site north of York between Skelton Bridge and Bentonborough, an overlay system where we've used the existing signalling system, got the design, our NRD group to help us with this. And we were hoping to get it for around 200 grand. It's actually cost us about 350 for the first one, proof of concept and all that kind of stuff. Because this is another one I've had to do SRP, MSRP, blah, blah, blah. This should have been in the ground and used. If you go past all them are in place. I had to argue, we put it in for 2 miles. The new system says you've got to have lights and noise. I'm like, but if I have 2 miles of it, there'll be like loads of lights come on at the same time. It'll be like a runway. The train drivers are just going to charm me lugs off if I do that. They'll complain. It's disturbing them, blah, blah, blah. So we had to sign off through risk assessment. The new process is rubbish. We're just going to put these in instead, which we've done. But we then had another 25,000 hoops that we've had to jump through. But Craig Marshall's been on user acceptance today. He's my project manager at Newcastle. And we think we're just waiting for the rubber stamp to come back from the project team, but I can switch it on and use it in a week and a half's time because Craig's off next week. Craig's going to go and use it, test it with the section manager and the local team before we go there, the wider team, and say, you can now use it. And again, it's a train operated system, but we've got to put straight running line procedures in, and that's the stuff that causes problem, because in times of perturbation, when you send train the other way, what you're going to do. So we have to put written instructions, controls in place, etc., etc. But the simplest thing to use, and if we can get this improved concept, we can use that. Rather, we can put 4 miles in for the price of what we would have done for one system using the traditional method. Popular with frontline colleagues because it's easy. So I talked about SAPWAS. This is ATWAS, which is automatic train warning system. That's because it has treadles to exit. So it's fully controlled. You know where a train is. But guess what? This has been proof of concept is even hard. This isn't through authorization. We've got some trial sites on East Midlands for this. But there's been obviously the problems and how do we assure that we're doing things in the right way. If a long train comes and a short train comes and all, you can imagine all the questions that may come around that. But it's all about works in the same way as that SATWAS does. It just exits and controls the exit as well. So just before I come on to this one, RDD, I said I would mention that. So that's remote control disconnection device. So the T code, you know, I showed you the picture placed in the forefoot. What an RDD is, it's a similar bit of kit, but it goes in the location cabinet and you remotely press it on your iPhone and it drops the track circuit in the cabinet rather than on the track. It's cheaper and there's no ongoing costs. But there's been teeth and trouble with that as well. They've been trialling that on Wales and Western, and I think we're over all the teeth and troubles. Dave Allen, who's part of the National Task Force, must have told me about 20 times now, Dave, it's close. So it's Christmas and next Christmas and the Christmas after. But he says, he assures me that that's really close. That also allows us to take possessions and things. The other one that I didn't mention, which we use as additional protection, is disconnection. And I'll explain that a little bit. So again, we've led from the front. Martin Errington's worked closely with Adrian Moss, who's now our regional signalling team. And we used to have equipment up the North Main Line, and that was associated with all the signal boxes up the main line. So signal boxes at Almouth and et cetera, et cetera. So what Martin and Adrian have worked is so we can replicate what that looks like in the signalling system back at Tyneside Rock. So we can have the CCTs on a desk at Tyneside Rock and they can give a disconnection anywhere on the Newcastle patch at any time. And we've got CCTs in situ 24 hours a day. So now what you can do is you can take additional protection by disconnection. So you phone the signaller, say, I want to take a line blockage between A and B and use disconnection. They contact the CCT.
Control centre
technician, sorry. Acronyms, I just flow with them all the time. Control centre technician. They place the disconnection remotely. They just do it on the text terminal. Drops the track circuit, the signal goes happy days, done. And it's usually as quick as that. So we're working on that. And the reason why it's important, I'm going to come on to this now, which is the latest thing that we've again trialed in Newcastle. There's a reason why we trial a lot in Newcastle, because that's where I work, obviously. And if there's anything new, we want a bit of that ourselves. So T3D is taking possessions using disconnections rather than sending somebody out and placing boards and debts at either end of your possession. So a bit of background to this. Not really the standard, requires protection to use detonators and possession limit boards. Anybody that's been on the railway for any period of time will know how we take possessions. But there's been so many occasions where we've put people out placing protection and they've been in the wrong place. From a track worker safety point of view, this has been one of my bugbears, and all the time that I've done. This is the biggest risk I think that we had. Send an individual out in the dark by themselves on a line that's running at 125 miles an hour. So if they're in the wrong place, they're in an open line in the dark by themselves at 125 miles an hour. And we've had numerous examples of that being the case, because boards have been hit or debts have been run over. And we have had accidents where people have been involved and killed by placing protection in the wrong place. I think it's been one of our biggest. So that's why Camden recommendations was about how are we going to get rid of people having to do that particular activity. And that was a near miss in 2016-17 and improvement notice served by the ORR. So the ORR have been all over this as an activity that isn't a safe thing to be doing. You know, where we talked about earlier, people being in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's an example of it. because they've had a safe work pack to go to the right place to do the right thing, but they've been in the wrong place, trying to do the right thing and placed it in the wrong place. So there was some research, because we have had challenge from the unions about you can't get rid of debts. So do the drivers actually hear them? And if they hear them, what do they think? Track workers, so I have a possession from Benton to the border, 70 miles long, and I place protection at the 2-mile post and the 70-mile post. How far away do you think my workers are working from them debts? They can be miles away from them. So they're never hearing that the debts have gone off if a train's gone through them. So who are they actually protecting being there in the first place? And then research paper concluded that as a secondary risk control, PLB effectiveness can be influenced by a number of factors. So what we want to do was to remove the use of the detonators, and we want to use, originally we started talking about using TPWH versus the train protection warning system that's fitted to the signalling system. And we tried this in Doncaster, and it wasn't conclusive in any way, shape or form. So we then understood and had a look at what alternatives were, which when we went to disconnection. So back to my friend in the CCT, they can do any remote disconnection across my patch at the minute. So we can just ask the CCT, the possessions between A and B, drop track circuit, C and D, that protects that possession. So that's in hierarchy of control, everybody's been agreed through the risk assessment that that was the right thing to trial. So that's the basis of the proposal. And then we said that this has been talked about since 2009. But after we'd had a series of near misses on our patch, I pushed and we got in touch with Emrys Warner, who had this body of work that was happening in the background already through technical authority. How can we just need somebody with a bit of push to want to do this. And Martin Errington, who's the IME at Newcastle, was the guy that wanted to do it. So we did that, did the risk analysis, talked about the rule changes that was trial at London Bridge, and then we said we'd do a trial at the north of East Coast Main Line. The trial consisted of 3 different levels. So we talked about a simple possession that had no machines or anything in it. Then we talked about possession, taking it around a machine. Then the third phase was taking a possession, bringing a train into the machine, into the possession and taking the train out of it. Because obviously before they used to approach the PLB, so we've put process in place of how we control movements into and out of possessions. So we've done all 3 versions of that. Everyone that's been involved in it has been positive feedback from the offering. So we initiated the trial and we've used Morpeth, Allenmouth, Tweedmouth and Edinburgh Rock, because when we take our possession of Marshall Meadows, it actually affects the signalling in Scotland as well. So we had to bring them on board. That was tricky the first week we did it, because depending on how well they brief their end of the chain, the gadget that's on duty the night that you turn up go, I don't know anything about it. And we had that, but we had the right people on nights when we were doing the trial to ease the pain, and we got it over the line. It was that successful. We've extended the trial to the whole of the Newcastle Rock area. By that, what I mean, so from North Allerton to the border is what Newcastle Rock covers. And because all the signallers and the operational team in Newcastle Rock had been briefed for the trial north of Newcastle, they thought that the risk to extend it to the whole of Newcastle Rock was 0. So that's what we've done. Modernising maintenance, where we've got the right number of staff. We did the first possession in Darlington 3 weeks ago, because I've been promising them that we were going to take it there. So this is what happens on a normal Saturday night. 6 of our staff have to go out in different vans with boards and debts, place them, and then bring them back in again at the end of the shift. Usually takes about 45 minutes at the beginning, 45 minutes at the end. We did the disconnection 3 weeks ago, took 12 minutes to put the protection on with one person, the pie cock and the CCT in the box. Took 9 minutes to take it off again. In itself, we've got over an hour of productive time added to our possessions than we had before. That's a side benefit, by the way. That isn't what we did the process on the back of. 6 people having to go out in 6 safe system of work packs. So all that work that has to go on to be able to send them 6 people to do that, now eliminated. Martin, who was the pie cop, different Martin. I was talking to him yesterday. I said, how did you think the T3D went, Martin? Best thing that I've ever been involved in, Dave. He said, I had 1 phone call to make to the signaller. The signaller then talks to the CCT. Usually, I've got 6 or 7 phone calls to make to different people. Have you placed that protection? Gives a ring back. He says, and then people are starting to ring me about, Martin, have you got possession yet? He said, the amount of phone calls, I'd get confused. Who am I talking to? He said, 1 phone call, 12 minutes. And that was because it was the first time that we did it. Last weekend, we did the south of Newcastle, part of Newcastle, for the first time. Took less than 9 minutes to take the possession, and similarly to take it back off again. Again, Newcastle Station is one of my busiest possessions on a Saturday night. To be able to take that and get an hour extra just means the world to us as a team, that our productivity can improve massively. But again, I'll reiterate, that's just a side benefit. Not sending people out in the dark alone to do stuff is the key part.
So to touch on that, then, could it work for actual council areas as well?
So what we've called it is disconnection, right? And the reason we've called it disconnection is so you don't have to do the physical disconnection using a CCT. If you can prove that you've taken occupation of a track circuit in a different way, you can do it in a different way. And we talked about potentially using ZKLs or RDDs that I talked about before. Whatever we need to do to replicate that, there's a training section on that particular place. We haven't done it for EPR yet. And I'm going to be selfish here. I don't care about axle counts because I haven't got anything. But you know what I mean? We are looking at how do we move into block working and all that kind of stuff. How do we do it in the other parts of the business that I don't have? But I'll sort myself out first.
Just in regards to the axle counter sort of area, obviously there's the new ACODs that have now come out for the axle counters. So is that probably an option for the axle counters?
And I haven't been involved in them, but I have heard of them. So they're relatively new, and it might be the way that we can do it. Yeah. Support and work. So, you know, I've talked about the hoops that need to be jumped through. This is even worse when you want to change process that's been in place for 100 million years and do it in a different way. You can imagine the red treacle that you've got to crawl through, not tape, treacle that you have to crawl through to make this happen. Hazard workshops. But the supporting team that we've had from Technical Authority to help us to get to this place have been great. And when you've got somebody like Martin that wants to push it through, then you've got a chance of success. So Jim Douglas, he's an old hand. He came in as a contractor to come and help us to do this. His knowledge about operational procedures and going through T-Crag and going through all them things that I don't know anything about was just invaluable to help us. So him as a consultant on board, Emrys and the project management team. And then there was us as the track worker safety program. All parties had to be involved to make this happen. And Jim was tremendous. And it helped ease the burden because he's from the Scottish kind of side of the border and he helped us with Edinburgh. Timescales. So you remember I talked about 2009 was where this was thought about. We brought this to the table in October 22. So this is where Jim really helped us. He took it to Tom SC. They helped us with NRAP and SRP, you know, them things that I know nothing about. They helped us to get through them things. Then we started the trials. It was supposed to be in December's rule book, but we're a bit like that, whether it's going to make it into December's rule book. The reason why that's important is as soon as it's in the rule book, everybody can do T3D. We think it might have to be into the new year that happens, but they're going to extend our trial certificate to allow us to continue doing it because we've proved it. So in lots of ways, I don't really care what happens to the next phase, but I do, because I want it to happen on my York patch as well, and I can't do it on the York patch until I get it in the real book. I've already mentioned the support from Tom SC. So why do I do it? And these are the slides I've just added in after I went with the safety culture workshop today. And one of the things you talk about is why safety important to you. So I'll explain the pictures. So the one on the left is me and my wife in the Amalfi Coast earlier this year. And I talked about the risks that I'd taken earlier in my career anybody that's been on the career a long time will have a near miss story to tell you about. And in this audience, I'll not tell you about mine. But my boss, when I owned up to it a few weeks later after I'd had it, said, Dave, I don't want to go and knock on your door to tell your wife that you're not coming home. And made me reflect a bit. And I talked about my lens change from when I did the safety stuff. The middle picture's me and my two sons in Berlin a couple of weeks ago. The reason why this is important, the one on the left actually works on the railway now in my depot. So my lens about how I look after my people has got a subtle difference now because my son actually works on the railway. Do I want to place him in the dangers that I placed myself in when I was young and daft? No, is the answer. And the one on the right, I know. Thanks, Joe. The one on the right, so I'll explain who's in that picture. So Jason Hamilton, he's the Works Delivery Director for East L&E East Midlands. Martin Errington, you've heard me mention him a few times. Mary Wakefield, she's the Health and Safety Manager for East Coast Route. So they're colleagues, but they're also friends. And us as a team work really hard to make people safe. I think we've got the same kind of attitude and behaviour. And it's the shadow that we cast that we give the message to people that work below us. And I couldn't be more stronger in that opinion. People had seen some of the stuff that I've done before. My realisation now is, what was I telling other people to do? So the shadow we cast is really important. And I also care about them as friends as well. So they're not just colleagues, they're friends of mine, and I wouldn't want any harm to come to any of them either. So you've got your family, you've got your colleagues, and then you've got everyone that works for you. Everyone, I should have said that warning. Sorry. So everyone all safe every day. So it's not just about killing people. So this has happened in the past week. So I've got a safety bulletin alert, which is this one on the left. So that's high output team in crew that were carrying some 9 metre by 1 metre kind of, and it was a bit awkward to carry. And one of them dropped it, landed on his leg. Now in a knee brace, which will be on for 2 months, and they don't know the damage that he's done to the tendon in his leg. That one is actually on my patch. We talked about that on our track worker safety call that we have every Friday about accidents and incidents on East Coast Route. So this is a new walkway that's been put in. So it's a trough and route and walkway, TRU, they're putting that in. But you can probably see the lids are not probably aligned, they're probably in and out of it. That's a disc box, for those that know that the S&T do. That's live equipment that's in that, by the way, but they've pulled them out and placed them on the floor while they did this. The guy in question was walking along there, probably with a head torch on, lost his foot and landed on that. And that's the result. 3 stitches in his thigh. Thankfully, it wasn't more serious than that, and he's back to work the next day. But we say home safe every day, them 2 guys. So there might have been ice skaters, there might have been footballers, they might like hike, whatever they might like doing in their personal lives, they're not going to be able to do for the foreseeable future. It's not just about work, it's what you do in your private life and how that affects what you do in your personal life all the time. And I want people to reflect about what you do and the effect that it has on others. That was it. Questions? Thanks, Dave.
Are you doing that? Yeah, are you winning the attitude problem?
So am I winning the attitude problem? Slowly but surely, I think. We had an interesting conversation today in the safety culture workshop about PPE, for example. And those that have been on a long time will know, well, if you've been on a really long time, you didn't wear PPE at all. Then we went to that mini vest. And I used to love the renewals when I used to work on the renewals because the guys used to wear it around their waist, shirts off, all that. And they used to say it's because I'm always bending over. You can see it more when I'm bending over. To full orange that we are now. The PPE equipment that we supply to our staff now is second to none. Boots are tremendous. I used to buy my first pair of boots for £6 off this van that used to come to the depot. And they used to knock your feet. And they were only comfortable when they were ready to change them to the next pair. The pair that we get now, £100 a piece or more than that. But then we moved to hard hats. I remember when we introduced hard hats, and that was a nightmare trying to get people to wear hard hats. But very rarely will you go to a site now where you don't see the people with the hard hats on. The next one is glasses and gloves. But glasses are my biggest bone of contention. The reason I'll explain, because if you fall over and break your leg, generally it fixes and mend and you can walk again. A bit like them two individuals that we've got there. They will be better, I suppose. But if you get something in your eye, you lose your eye, you've lost your eye. There's no coming back. And we've done campaign upon campaign of trying to get people to wear glasses. I was out on site a couple of weeks ago. Guy can go packing, no ear protection, no eye. And there's an engineer, there's a section manager, assistant section manager, all. Why does it take the IMDM to say, can you get him to put his glasses on, please? So I don't want to do it myself. I want the leadership team to own the leadership of their own team. But I'm still struggling of why people don't want to wear glasses. I've had all the steam up. We've done it, anti-steaming. We've done everything, in my opinion, to make that. And gloves is the other one. It's the right gloves, the right job, and all that kind of stuff. And we still have accidents, lacerations, back of hand, cut fingers, people using Stanley knives needing cutting the fingers off, all that kind of stuff. So gloves and glasses are still a challenge, I think. But the general PPE is the best it's ever been in my time on the railway. Yeah.
Can I throw a question in?
You can.
I guess leading a external principal contractor using organisation, I'm sometimes accused by my supply chain of Network Rail creating a two-tier approach to additional protection. So there's a whole load of technology if you're on a given area regularly where you can make use of that. But if you're a project team landing in an area perhaps to do a survey or perhaps just to visit to do a piece of work, then we don't make it easy as Network Rail for an external supplier to access that same stuff. So I still have to have lots and lots of people out on a Saturday night that rely on depths and marker boards and take line blockages and rely on detonators as their additional protection. So and creating that thing that you said around individuals being out on their own, but also in places they don't know.
Which is even worse. Yeah, back to the point of people being in the wrong place. So I suppose the way I want to get to is by disconnection. So we have CCTs 24/7 in York Rock and in Newcastle Rock. But I know for a fact the teams that work out at King's Cross and Peterborough try to use the CCTs in York and they get told we haven't got capacity to do that. That's the polite way that they're told no. And actually that is true. So we're actually doing a bit of work is what's the right number of CCTs, and we're looking, so I've been working with Paul Rutter on this to create a new role. And we're trying to agree nationally what that new role is to be an assistant CCT or an operative CCT, because I don't want them to have to be full CCTs because it's actually a complicated job because you've got to monitor all the remote systems that are giving signal and fault information and all that kind of. They're not just there to do disconnections, but a lot of them are spending a lot of their time just doing disconnections. So let's split the role up, put additional heads in. And also I've got then a pipeline of CCTs of the future. So it's a problem. So I haven't got capacity. I've got so many heads at both locations and they're not full. And the reason they're not full is because if I advertise them, people in S&T will put in for them. And I can't afford to lose S&T into them positions. That's the honest answer. So I am trying to create a secondary role. And once we've got full capacity at that location, anyone should be able to use RailHub, get a disconnection, book their line blockage, and the CCT should be able to have capacity to do that. We're not there yet, Ben, so I look after myself first. I'm only joking, but you know what I mean. Go on.
Notice the work you're doing, the technology to help, and also the work attitudinally with the premier European railways and where they are at the moment. How do you compare?
So it's interesting. A lot of the stuff that we've brought from Europe. So ZKLs are used in Holland and Germany. The RDD are already used in some places. Not sure about the disconnection part, but the way we take possessions is different to what they do in Europe and things, and we do try to learn and transfer what we do. But what usually happens is companies want to develop something in the UK because our processes and procedures seem to be the most stringent. And then when they get the rubber stamp from us, they then can sell it worldwide because the process is usually given that they can do that. So yeah, we do look at what other people are doing and try to adopt it in ZKLs, because we've got this bunker that controls all the information and stuff somewhere in Germany, I think it is, which is part of the 1,500 quid a year that we pay for each one of those to monitor the system and make sure that they're on live and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it's a European bit of kit. Holland, I think, was developed it.
Introduced whether you had talked about introducing this elsewhere. So just wondering for earthworks or trainees for examination has to rely going on track, and whether like preventing a landslip and the training keeping that, whether it was ever considered as part of.
There was interesting question because we've had a fight about this, haven't we? So I mentioned that I was the lead for Eastern Region, then I was also lead for East Coast. So when we were making decisions about what we were going to do, we wrote to all departments, including all our contracting fraternity, had them all in, said, this is what we're going to do. Because Rob McIntosh was 100% guaranteed. If it applies to anyone, it applies to everyone. So in Eastern Region, the rules apply to everyone. And then to answer you, the second part of your question was there unintended consequences to that? So we've got earthworks examinations that have gone out of date. We've got structures examinations that have gone out of date. And I'm going to say it, and they're blaming that we've got a more restrictive access. Some people forget that I used to be RASM track and civils, and I used to look after the earthworks examinations then, and they were always out of date then as well, by the way. But it has made it more difficult. I do hold that up. So we've had discussions within the exec nationally, and we've had it regionally about how do we control that risk. So we've come to an agreement. If system risk far exceeds people risk, then we've got to make an engineering decision. But I will say we haven't had to make a people risk difference yet, because we've managed to do and catch up all the serious issues and examinations through being more integrated with our maintenance colleagues. And that's where we've got it wrong in the first place, isn't it, Claire? It's how we plan together.
Ben, together rather than compete.
Yeah, and Ben talks about, so I am selfish sometimes in that I want our maintenance activities. So some of my things are 36 hours, I've got to do it. So they have to be the people that get the first choice. But that doesn't mean that my 36-hour person can't be with somebody from earthworks. So I have rolling SATWAS between Ferry Hill and Newcastle. Every week it moves on. I didn't explain that one, but it's the same principle as SATWAS. I just told Aaron, tell me where you've got your examinations to do, and I'll tell you which week you can come in and do it. We should be PC. And Aaron's managed to get all these serious ones in the north done within the first few weeks. We got them all planned in. Simon Pumphrey is our infrastructure director. We talk a lot about how do we have our planning integrated much better, because of where I've been in the past, earthworks examination, a structures examination is a maintenance examination as well. We get a bit siloed in maintenance, and it helps that if you've been somewhere else and seen the other side of the coin, that other people need to have the access. So Ben's right. Having PCs, which is protection controllers, or where multiple people can work in the same access footprint. We've got to be better at integrated planning and understanding who wants to be in and doing what at what frequency. And when we get smarter at that, the engineering risk disappears and the people risk stays low. But we haven't had to break our people risk thing yet.
I think it's probably helped because the examiners, the earthwork examiners and some of the structural examiners are Network Rail employees. I think it might have been trickier if they were contractors. Because of that, they can't do quite the same activity as Network Rail people can. So I think that's probably helping.
So One thing that has changed since I looked after them is that they've come in-house, and we debated that when I was Rasmussen with Claire about bringing them in, and we have done that now. So Claire's right to that extent, but actually there was a large proportion that we still made a contract with for other people to do our way, didn't we? And it was, but they generally were using possessions, and we were trying to give them access footprint outside of the routine. I nearly did a special signal box instructions, because we call them SBSIs. They're fixed footprints that we use on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. Good question though, because that has potentially been an unintended consequence. I thought I boxed it off early, but they didn't do what I told them to do in the first place.
Couple of questions online from Pete Flynn. The first is any consideration of using protection zone, which is already approved and in the rule book as an alternative to T3D.
So we were using the rules and regulations around protection zone to help us to get to the position with T3T as it happens. So we do that now and again. When we did the high speed testing when I was in the RASM team to run at 140 mile an hour, we use protection zones. So it's not something that we're not adverse to, but it's something that we can deal with on a day-to-day basis. But we help, the rules and regulations around protection zone actually helped us to get to where we needed to be using Thomas C and the technical authority.
I guess for those that aren't familiar with the concept, it was something we developed in high output that says if you've got a 3,000 ton train sat on a piece of line, then providing you know what that train is and where it is, then you're fairly well protected that nothing else is going to come along, because it's pretty good at occupying a track circuit on its own. So how do we harness that? The fact that we've got a big yellow train there as a means of protection.
And actually high output, one of the people that using ZKLs and disconnections to do their possessions to try and quicken up how fast we took them and handed them back. So we went on the back of that kind of concept as well. So it wasn't just the protection, so it's the other stuff that you were involved in to take possessions. Yeah.
And then Pete's second question is around behavioural safety. He's aware of a programme to train signalling maintenance staff on non-technical skills. Is this being rolled out to all the disciplines?
So yeah, is. So I talked about the cost course. We've actually been doing quite a lot. I'll speak about East Coast route now around non-technical skills. So we've had all our engineers, all our section managers have been doing leadership training, and it's the non-technical skills that we're focusing on now. We're now going to extend that to all supervisors and all team leaders, because they're the people that are frontline managers after all, and they're the ones that lead the teams on a day-to-day basis. So we're doing a lot of work in that soft skills part, as well as the cost course being redesigned to take soft skills into consideration as well. Because the hardest part of being a cost is actually controlling the people and the risks and all the things that's associated, not just taking the line blockage or taking the protection. It's how do you speak to people, how do you take challenge on, all them things that get involved as being a PIC that we just assume people just do. Some people are good at it, some people are not. What we need to do is lift the bar. And if you ask me, are all our COSs that we've got signed off as COSs capable of being that person as a PIC? My honest answer is no. It's how do we get the right ones to be the people that do it on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions?
For a long time now, the train services on the network have been thickening up, not extra services being produced. Do you think we're getting any smarter as an industry to understand what capacity is actually available and what capacity is actually required for maintenance and job?
Yeah, so we have a team, and we're quite fortunate on East Coast route, but he works across LNE and East Midlands, as was Pete Hancock, Safe and Effective Working Team. And they look at that all the time, and they review it on a 6 monthly basis whenever we get a new timetable out, what effect that has on our access footprint for both line blockages, possessions, and what we fit into those, and what's our opportunities, white space and all that kind of stuff. So we do review it on a regular basis about what access have we got and how do we use that, which is why in some ways the warning systems that I'm talking about are more useful to us, because we at the minute we'll have a place, and let's take a junction. So I talked about I'm going to get East County over the line with Southwest in the next week or so. Today, what happens is they've got to go take a line blockage. And because it's S&C crossover, both like they're trying to get a line blockage and they'll get 6 minutes. So they'll go on, do their 6 minutes work, off again. I want them to take additional protection that takes a minute off them. So 5 minutes off, stand for 20 minutes, half an hour, take another line blockage. That doesn't mean that I want them to work, because you can see a mile in either direction. This is me team that one. Dave, give us a flag because I can see miles in either direction. So I'm now going to give them an automated system that tells them when a train's going to come in either direction and warn them and get them off in a timely manner. Minimum 25 seconds warning. We can't do major works and power tools and stuff, but we can inspect and minor tool stuff. And that's the stuff that I need to give people the opportunity to do stuff. Because I'll always have to have staff during the day. Because if something happens, I need somebody to be at work to respond and repair. So I will always have people at work 24/7. I can't afford just to pay somebody to sit in the van waiting for something to happen.
At the very beginning, you mentioned the team were reviewing this for the whole route. But do you feel your discipline has enough input early enough in the process before train operators are granted contractual rights?
That's a good question. And when I was in the DRAM team and I was in the RASM, we were part of the group that was involved in decision making of what the contract looked like. The short answer is no, but we need to get better at doing that. But we actually only use 50% of the access that we've got. The question is, do we have the right access in the right place at the right time? It's easy to say you only use 50% of the access, but it's no good to me if I don't use it. But what we're going to get more intelligent at is, if we're not using certain access, give them that back and then say, can I have this instead? And train operating companies are open to negotiations about certain things. We've even trialled on East Coast routes doing renewals during the week rather than on a weekend. When we did it down south, it wasn't financially viable the way that the losses from the train operating companies didn't cover the cost that we'd save by doing it midweek. But we actually did a renewal north of Newcastle and we were almost break even. So there's ways and means, because we all know recreational traffic is where it's at the minute. They want to run later trains, earlier trains on a weekend, because people want to do what they want to do on a weekend. Business travel in particular is still down. We're about 70% pre-COVID kind of times. And it's important about the business part because they're the ones that pay the big money tickets. So if we switched off Tuesday, Wednesday, they still lose the revenue of that, because sometimes the recreational person will go on a Friday and come back on Monday, whereas the business person probably doesn't travel at all, works from home now. And so there's a mindset change in the industry that we have got to catch up on. But there's some work doing, and earlier the better, because for possessions and things we talk 2 years out, and for even Section 5 access we talk about 1 year out, and if we want new Section 5 access we should be talking about now for a year and a half's time. So yeah, we've got to get people switched on to thinking further ahead.
One of the things we did as part of the reopening of the Northumberland line in terms of we looked at the freight paths that could potentially run during the day, and looking at how they run around the passenger half-hourly frequency, and we actually blocked out some of those freight opportunities within the timetable and said, the timetabling rules now say they cannot be offered at any point in future because they're critical line blockage opportunities to be able to maintain S&C.
And freight's actually more complicated to deal with than passengers sometimes. And we've got a classic example. The mail train runs out of Newcastle, but just south of Newcastle station every night and comes back again. So that stops us working any overhead line work south of Newcastle in the 2-track section. So that's because we can't isolate both roads. So we've now said, can we not diesel haul that now and again? Get Sam McDougall's Thunderbird train that he's got on the front of it and pull it down and pull it back. And we said, yeah. So it's about thinking differently to operate in a different way, which is part of your challenge, I think, for your question. Yeah.
One final question from me. I'm conscious of the on-wave jacket in the room as well. Where do personal worn devices sit in this sphere. We talked a lot about protection systems, in terms of how we interact with signalling. You know, how about things that tell people when they drift into the path of
all over that as well.
the train?
The difficulty that we've got on the East Coast, use East Coast as a route, how many different operators that we've got on the route. If you had one operator, one section, it would be much easier to work with the TOC to work through that. But I showed the picture of Martin and Mary, who are part of the technology working group. So we have a project board every month, and one of them is about protection systems, which T3D was part of that working group that we did. But we've been talking about geofencing, we've been talking. So Mary would love everybody to have a device on them, so we knew where they were all the time. Guess what? Our union colleagues are not too keen on that. So we're trying to get it. So when you're within the boundary fence, we know where you are. Then we might have a chance with getting that. But let's start about within possessions, know where people are, and there's some work going on in that space already. I've had 3 or 4 different companies, including yours, come and talking to me about devices, how you get warned doing them and all that kind of stuff. Exclusion zones, creating exclusion zones. So that's both in and out of exclusion zones. So around a machine, around welders, creating a zone that you keep within. When you start moving towards it, gives you the warning, and then you get a bigger warning when you're actually on. So we're all over some of that. I'm not convinced fully about geofencing. The reason being is it's only classed as a secondary protection system. I can't use it as a primary one. So I'm thinking, yeah, it's belt and braces, but I still have to do the other stuff. So what am I going to pay thousands of quids for when I don't get that much benefit from it, other than it's a secondary protection system? So early days, I think, in that space, but there's definitely some work to be done. And I would love it, particularly in possessions where we know we've got tagging of equipment. We're already in that space where we know where our trolleys are. We talked about, even though I'm trying to get rid of them, putting tags on PLB boards so we knew where they are. So that I've put them in the right place. So because the accuracy of where it tells you where stuff is, it's that good now. We can do that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm all over anything to do with technology that will improve the situation.
Again, on that, I think from a personal perspective, it's about having the opportunity to tie some of it together. Working with more than a dozen different suppliers, I see lots of different approaches that are quite disparate. I guess it's how we tie it together as an industry and come up with a consistent way of applying the technology. Okay, any final question in the room, or everyone ready to say? I guess, Dave, thanks very much for a really interesting, enlightening presentation. I guess you've taken us through additional means of additional protection, and also through what we're doing in the warning systems space as well. So it's been great to get your personal reflections on why we do it. So I really appreciate you giving up your time to come and talk to us. And I guess if in the room we can say thank you in the usual way, and I guess those online will join us as well. So yeah, quick reminder of those dates. He says, pulling his phone out of his pocket to remind himself. Monday the 11th of December for the AGM and social. 18th of January for Stephen Bell, PWI President, which is our next formal meeting, and then have a look at the email for what flows after that. If you're online, thank you very much for attending. Yet again, we've got slightly more interest online than we've got in the room, but it was over 30 people overall, which is a good turnout for a really interesting talk. If those in the room can help with cups back and tables rearranged before we possibly head off to the York Tap for a quick drink afterwards, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Cheers.